Haley, which agenda items did we get revised documentation for?
It's item number 3, and I already uploaded that to the G Drive for you. Um,
Oh, okay, great.
Stephen emailed it to us, and I downloaded it, and I saved it as item number 3 in the design
Oh
review.
my gosh, thank you for that.
Yeah,
Okay,
of course. I added
so
it to the back of the old drawings, and I just put a note, old drawings on the last few pages.
gotcha. We are still missing most of our committee members.
Um, okay. I noticed that the link for the Outlook invite that I sent did not work for me, but then when I clicked your email, that did work. So I don't know if some of the committee members are struggling with that.
Let's check our emails.
No, it's not. They didn't email me. I've been watching.
Okay. Well, I don't know if you want to proceed without quorum or because
We can just
I'm
give it about 3 more minutes.
okay, great.
I didn't hear from anyone that they weren't going to make it.
Right.
Do we want to call them and see if they're going to attend? I don't feel necessarily comfortable proceeding without a quorum.
Okay. I'll call Danny. You call Miguel, Joseph.
Yeah, let me get his number.
So it looks like we have everyone, but we didn't contact Lindsay Glatz.
I'm letting everyone else in now.
Okay. Good morning. I would like to call the Wednesday, July 21st DAC meeting to order. We will begin with roll call. Haley Dellery, present. Joseph Cologne,
Present.
Danny McElmurray,
I'm here.
Eleanor Burke,
Here.
Galvatary, I think we can see that Miguel signed in, but he may be having issues with audio. It's showing that there's no microphone or video. So he may have to just add his comments through the chat.
Yeah, Haley, he's connecting via his mobile. He's trying to connect through a computer now, so we'll give him some time.
Thanks.
He is present though. Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Lewis Haywood.
Here.
And Lindsay Glatz. Absent. One item on today's agenda. Well, I'm sorry. The public comment form link is available at nola.gov/CPC and will be available until the end of the 5-minute recess, after which public comments will be read into the record as part of the consideration of dockets. At this time, would the committee make a motion to adopt the meeting minutes from the June 16th DAC meeting?
Make that motion.
We have a motion by Parks and Parkways. Do we have a second?
Eleanor seconds.
Okay, a second by HDLC. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All
Aye.
opposed? And the motion passes. One item on today's agenda has been withdrawn. Item number 8, design review docket 7821 for a property at Berman Park has been withdrawn. We will begin with the consideration of dockets. Item number 2 is the reconsideration of design review docket 4321 for a property at 3200 St. Bernard Avenue. We have Seneca Toussaint signed up to speak on behalf of this application, and Joseph is the CPC staff member assigned to this case. As a reminder, following the staff presentation, the applicant will have 10 minutes to present. Joseph?
Hey, yeah, sorry about that. I'm seeing the applicant just emailed me and they're saying that they were not ready to appear today and they will also be on the August agenda. So we can go ahead and withdraw this one and review it next time as well.
Okay, thank you, Joseph. So item number 2 is withdrawn. The third item on today's agenda is the consideration of zoning docket 5221 for a property at 1152 Magazine Street. You may remember that this property previously received conditional use approval for multiple components, including an indoor live entertainment venue. This conditional use request is now before us because they are proposing to add a standalone wine shop. And the scope of DAC's review today would be to look at the proposed facade modifications. We have Megan Bell signed up to speak on behalf of this application. Megan, you now have 10 minutes to present.
Okay, so I just wanted to clarify also that we're presenting both 1150 Magazine Street and 1152 Magazine Street, which is going to be handled by 2 separate permit applications. The drawings that are pulled up here are for 1150 Magazine Street, so I'll start with that project. This project is not impacted by a conditional use, but requires staff review just based off of the overlay. And so this is the first time I think anybody's really seen this project presented. And it's pretty simple. What's happening on the site now is that there's a wedge-shaped open area on the Calliope side of the property that we intend to do a new addition on. This addition basically recreates a storefront for the current tenant, which is Merchant House. And then at the front of the existing warehouse building, we plan to carve out both the first floor and second floor tenant space that are accessed off of Magazine Street. So there'll be a total of 3 tenants. This drawing is actually, it was the first drawing we submitted. We tried to swap out drawings, I think 2 weeks ago. I don't know if we could pull that elevation up because we changed the style of the upper level windows slightly. Yeah, I think this is an outdated version. We actually changed the upper level windows to be aluminum. There we go. That's the one. Aluminum clad windows that are molded together to give the opening a more warehouse-like feel. So that's the main change in these drawings. So the existing overhead door at the ground level, we're proposing infilling with storefront, and then removing the 2 small upper level windows to be replaced with these mold together aluminum clad windows. With the addition, what we intend to do is an open air addition that still provides for security. So if Merchant House were to store patio furniture or plants out within this structure, they would still have a way to lock it down at night and provide security. So the development of that was just to do these 4x4 fence panels, which are these wire fence panels that are PVC coated. So that's the kind of grid pattern that you see in the elevation. And we tried to detail it in a more traditional way where the front has a parapet condition that could be trimmed out with like a composite trim element, and then you'd have the infill of these PVC clad wire mesh fence panels that would create a double gate at the front that could be opened for when the business is open, and then another gate on the right side that provides access to the ADA ramp. The Merchant House tenant, which is located now in the rear of the building, is actually at an elevation that's approximately 4 feet above the sidewalk grade. So they need a pretty significant ramp in order to provide both ADA access and for ease of furniture moving in and out of the facility. The bay spacing you can see on the Calliope elevation is of the panels themselves is about 6x8, which is the maximum size these panels come in. And again, we're trimming out the parapet and sides and bottom of these assemblies with like a combination of composite trim and a smooth, hardy panel. And I'm not sure if we want to go through any questions on this property before moving into 1152.
I have a question. I was wondering, is it the ramp that you're installing that's the reason why the building needs to be set back from the front property line, the new addition? I guess my question is, why is the addition set back from the front property line?
I think we just wanted to create an offset and a kind of entry, an outdoor entry area. Where that facade actually falls out, I think is pretty flexible. The ramp itself does present a challenge, and I'm actually not sure how. I think I will have to answer some questions with like the state fire marshal, for instance, because what we're having to do is create, so there's a primary set of double door gates that are centered in that elevation. And then on the right side where the ramp is located, we would have another gate that would technically just stay open during operating hours. So it's not really meant to be an operating gate for any of the patrons of the space. But so what's happening currently is that the line of that facade is falling out after that first 12 feet of ramp, which brings you up approximately 1 foot. The grade resolutions here are a little bit complicated because what's happening with the sidewalk is that we're utilizing the sidewalk to provide ADA access to both buildings. We've done a BBSA appeal already for the base flood elevation of 1152, and they're allowing us to be 11 inches above the top of curb. And so what will have to happen with the sidewalk is that beginning on this neighboring property, will start sloping up such that there's a 0 grade change at these doors to 1152. We'll maintain that grade across the front of 1150 all the way to this ramp entry. And then beginning at that point, we have to work our way back down to the corner condition of the sidewalk. So it's a little tricky finding the right resolution to those grade changes at all of the various entrances. And I do think having some setback cleans that up a bit.
Yeah, I guess just urbanistically, typically it's odd to recess something at a corner. Seems like the typical response would be to fill out that corner with building. And I'm wondering if you couldn't, move the facade up and have the ramp happen on the interior of the building. I think it would be a stronger design than having a void there. I'm not sure how the other members feel about that.
I mean, it's a good point, Eleanor. I mean, I kind of want to hear about the other building too, but since we're talking about these ramps, I have a real huge concern about these ramps, and I know we've talked about it in other buildings, but so now the city's on the hook for steps and ramps and pedestrian safety in this location. But the other thing is, like, this is a perfect spot right there, that lower left corner. You're creating a ramp situation in front of somebody else's property, and it's not your property. So that concerns me greatly, actually, that there's an imposition on an adjacent property owner to accommodate your ramp and not, and you haven't contained your ADA access to your property. That's a big concern for us. Or it's a big concern for me, and because you haven't provided the street trees that are required. And so you're creating this situation that we're seeing repeated. It's not just you, so, and none of this is personal, Megan, I know you know that. But we're seeing the same situation being recreated elsewhere, especially on this location where this is a one-way street. And so car doors are gonna have to open out into this little planting area or onto the steps. And so it's very concerning to me about how this is designed to just put the ADA access in the public right of way instead of in your building where it belongs.
So just based off of some recent experience, we have a project on Britannia Street that utilizes the sidewalk for ADA access, and actually the grade transitions all the way up to like 30 inches above the top of curb, which I find excessive. I think this is a little bit more manageable as we're only going up a maximum of 11 inches above the top of curb elevations that are reflected on the elevation certificates. But on that Britannia project, we had a similar condition where the sidewalk modifications intruded onto a neighboring property. And we're told by DPW that we just had to notify that adjacent property owner. So that's been my only experience of this condition. The other thing I just want to mention is that there's a lot going on with this sidewalk currently. There's curb cuts in front of each of the overhead door openings, but also a curb cut for that neighboring property that basically starts at the 1152 building corner. Since that prior use of that lot, they have actually painted out parking striping, and you can see it indicated in the site plan where they actually have a full 18-foot deep parking space that's running perpendicular to Magazine Street. So this might be a bit naive, but I assumed, and I have talked with the owner about contacting that neighboring property owner to make sure that they're okay with us essentially cleaning up their curb cut condition, because they basically have a sloped sidewalk that's just leading directly into the side of a car currently. So the line that we've struck of modifying the sidewalk actually falls in line with the end of that parking space.
What it does is it creates where the parking space, the door opens on the parking space, you know, is there enough clearance for a front door to open out? You know, I wasn't a huge fan of that parking space to begin with, let me tell you. The other thing is, I mean, you're showing 3 steps up, and so that looks to be more than 11 inches to me. So, I mean, it looks like it's 18 inches in this rendering. So maybe it's a perspective of the rendering that makes it look like it's higher than it is. And then there are a bunch of underground utility connections at that point. And so I'm just curious as how those are being handled as well.
Yeah, so we, just full disclosure, we just got a civil team involved. This project's seen a lot of iterations over the past couple of years. So we don't have access to a lot of spot elevations on the property because we don't have a full survey of that sidewalk condition. I think that we're going to need some of those to make sure that we're resolving everything correctly. So what we've been using to approximate what we think is going on is the property bound surveys that have the grade elevations at the building corners, and then comparing that against what the elevation certificates list as the top of curb height for both properties. So I will say it's not accurate or 100% resolved yet. And we just wanted to give kind of a general idea of a solution. I know that we've done these sidewalk edges before without the stairs to the street. And I think the concern then was, if you have street parking, it forces somebody to have to circulate back through the street in order to find a point where they can access the sidewalk. But we're certainly open to whatever site modifications you would recommend to kind of resolve the condition.
So let me ask you this, are you, I guess you're raising the finished floor elevations in each of these buildings, the existing buildings? Is that what's going on?
Yes, so what's happening, what's kind of guiding the elevations is that the rear slab in 1152 is about 11 inches above the top of curb. Obviously at the overhead doors, it was more or less flush with the surrounding grade. So we're removing probably half of the existing concrete slabs in the building, and then building up the front of the building to match the rear elevation. And we were able to get a BBSA approval to hit that 11-inch mark rather than the 18 inches that's required, because it is a tax credit qualifying facility. And then as you move over to 1150, the front of the space is a historic floating dock area. And so pretty quickly, once you've entered into the building, there's currently a very steep ramp and some stairs that bring people up to that higher level. That's the slab level for the majority of the facility, but we would bring that front area up slightly in order to match that 1150 elevation and keep the sidewalks level across the front of the buildings.
So was there no opportunity to, in 1152, is to recess the storefront and have your ADA access inside your footprint?
Yeah, and I do think we will do tricks like that. There are some code criteria, like you're supposed to have a level landing on the inside and outside of your door. And so they don't love if you just ramp kind of right up to the door entry. But I do think when we get into a little bit more of the details here, we could resolve for at least some of the grade change in those vestibules, and then potentially even start sloping back down in between the entry to 1152 and 1150, just to try to get ourselves lower before we start working our way back to the curb.
Hey, morning, Megan. So I wanted to ask you some questions before I even attempted to comment and make some prescriptions in line with what my other committee members are saying. So I don't know if you could see my annotations, but this is kind of the dividing line, right? Like this is one project and then this is the other.
Correct.
Okay. So I'm very just fascinated by Eleanor's point, because I actually didn't mind the kind of like open space relief at this corner, but then just kind of reviewing this condition of these two buildings as one, right? And they can be accessed interiorly as well, correct?
So what's happening in the floor plan, you can't access what we're calling tenant one, which is that ground floor storefront in the old overhead door. They actually do want to have a convenience store between the two tenants internally, but the whole intention of the addition, aside from giving them some covered outdoor space for their plant and patio furniture programming, is to I think the owner's concern was that they're giving up their prime kind of storefront and street presence by creating that tenant in the front. It makes a lot of sense financially to do that, to get more leasable square footage into the building. And so the addition was an opportunity to still give Merchant House a strong presence on the street and have the feel of a historic storefront, even though in reality, the building is kind of an open air covered outdoor space.
Gotcha. And so, and what's just kind of the scope of work for this existing structure? I know we have photos of it later, which I can go to now, right? So these are the existing conditions. So what are the kind of, how much work do you plan to do on the exterior is what I'm trying to ask.
So that's been a little bit of a moving target, and we're bounded a bit by budget. So what we're attempting to do is just kind of, I think, do things that don't have a lot of visual impact, which is condition the building, put a new roof on it, insulate it, all of the things that make it a viable commercial property. And then as far as the facade is concerned, just trying to keep the modifications minimal, but still have a strong impact. And so we do propose on the Calliope side one set of the aluminum clad windows with the divided light configuration. And then, but otherwise on the Calliope side and the front of the building, we would maintain the existing metal panel cladding.
Yeah, because my only concern from an overall design perspective, I think I'm going to temper them, because it does sound like they are somewhat different tenants, but I just, in line with Eleanor's comments that it's kind of pushed far to the back, it feels like, especially in this rendering here, that sorry, I'm looking for the little tool. I can't find it right now. That this kind of condition is just so tacked on, right? And it doesn't really, it feels like it could be easily removed from both the property and its adjoining building. And I wonder if there's just, you're introducing a lot of architectural elements with the Merchant House. And I'm wondering if, one, we can start to see those elements reflected on the existing metal panel warehouse. Two, if there could be some kind of, if it's all exterior, then why does it look so enclosed? So maybe if you don't necessarily have to move up the front facade, but if you start to include maybe some like column and trellising elements to kind of create an somewhat covered entryway into that merchant house building that then ties into the front facade. So, right, that would mean carrying over some horizontal elements or something. And then lastly, or no, third, I'm just concerned that the warehouse, I mean, it exists, it's kind of low priority, but it doesn't really feel like it has a cornice or a top as the other adjacent two structures, the one that's existing and the one that's proposed. And lastly, it does look like there's outdoor seating behind the structure, but we're not seeing that reflected in the renderings. And so it feels like a very like, I totally understand how design goes and everything, but it just feels like a very like not thoroughly thought out space. And that it looks like loading right now, right? It doesn't look like a space for outdoor seating that, some of these landscaping treatments on other portions of the overall design have. And so those are kind of my forward prescriptions of what I think could make this a little more successful and address at least my concerns, maybe some of the other committee's concerns. So that's kind of where I'll leave it.
Yeah, I'll just add here that again, we've been through a lot of iterations. We actually have a general contractor on board that's doing design assist, and I'm sure this comes up for you guys a lot, but we're just I think the challenge that we have is like figuring out the appropriate places to put money into the project. And so we have considered like redoing the whole front facade of the existing 1150 warehouse. And I do think some of those older iterations would address your comments. Specifically, we looked at, instead of just a standard kind of commercial storefront infill of the ground floor tenant opening, doing something kind of similar to, I don't know if you guys are familiar, but the framework building that's further down on Magazine Street, where the bottom of the window openings could be clad with a similar like trim detailing as what we're proposing for the addition. So I think, obviously if that's a concern that we need to address, we're just gonna have to figure out how to pinch pennies elsewhere to get a little bit more of that facade treatment in place. I think the most challenging thing with the existing metal wall cladding is that as soon as you start to do new cladding materials, you're also having to treat the full building envelope. And while it wouldn't be our first recommendation, especially in a new construction scenario, we're not planning on like introducing a vapor barrier and sheathing and things like that. It's a very traditional kind of metal building style where these panels are attached directly to the structural girths behind it. And so we do plan to insulate and in some cases conceal that insulation, but the Merchant House program is kind of embracing that kind of warehouse look and feel as part of their brand. And so just where we are now in the design process, we don't intend to kind of recreate that exterior envelope.
Right. And that last thing I'll say is, just don't, I'm seeing a lot of whites, a lot of grays, a lot of blacks. We do live in New Orleans. Do not be afraid or kind of, ignore colors, especially on these kind of long warehouse facades that really could benefit from it.
Yeah, and sorry, I did want to mention too, this is kind of graphic. The program that we use, that 4x4 screen material just reads really heavy because it's basically rendering each line really thick. And I've had to explain this to the owners as well, because that's a concern of theirs. But these panels would appear really light and open air. In reality, this is just not a super accurate rendering of that material.
So Joseph, can you go to A101, just updated? Yeah. Next sheet, yeah. So on here, I'm seeing the ramp on the inside of this addition on the corner. and it leads up to a level that then goes inside to the rear part of 1152. Or I guess 1150,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
Is that all one? So that's all one tenant.
The demising line between what's the front tenant that's accessed through the storefront and the merchant house tenant is basically almost at the edge of the stair, that wall that you see that caps the bathroom and then runs across, and there is a small door indicated between the two. But so that front tenant would be a separate tenant. They have a lease agreement right now with the hat shop tenant. And then behind that wall, everything in the rear would be the current tenant, which is Merchant House.
So I'm curious as to, so the access for the front tenant, why aren't you using the one ramp to provide access for everyone? I mean, because you've got the front tenant, you still have stairs on the interior to get to the restroom, which makes it not accessible unless they come through the ramp that's in the addition and come around and use the door between the merchants. So I'm curious as to why we're seeing this. I'm going back to the sidewalk being raised. I have a real problem with the sidewalk being raised, especially this narrow of a sidewalk being raised like this. And it looks like you're already accommodating your ADA access on site. It's just your internal layout is not accommodating your access. And I'm curious as to why not. I don't understand why you can't deal with this internally.
Well, okay, so I guess first of all, the elevation is set by 1152, but the condition of the raised slab is existing, and so we have ADA act. We don't need a grade change for these doors to work based off of what was set by 1152, and actually, this existing lower level is currently at grade, so we're only raising it slightly and only to address the 1152 elevation that was established, but also they have a ton of water intrusion, and I don't think it's just related to the space being at grade. I think it's because there's an overhead door and not a lot of great ceiling and everything in the facade, which we would address. But second, what's happening with this addition is that if there was access to that tenant, I mean, you want to maintain Magazine Street frontage is one logic, but you would have to enter into the Merchant House's secured space in order to gain access to that tenant. Does that make sense? They'd have to have the key to the outdoor facility in order to access their space.
How is someone in a wheelchair going to access this restroom for the front space that's showing as an accessible restroom?
Yes, so that's something that we're going to have to address with the fire marshal, but that's an existing condition in the facility, is that the restroom is on the upper level.
So that still goes back to my question. I have so many questions about the grading. I mean, I hope you understand that that's what I'm getting at is I'm not seeing the finished grades. I don't see a grading plan. Maybe I missed it, but I don't see one. And you're already showing that you can accommodate ADA access on site. There may be a way you might have to rearrange it or use that front corner and build to the corner, but use that as your ramp and enter from the side. You've already got penetrations on that side. I'm just really, really concerned about us continuing to allow these sidewalk conditions they're increasing the capacity for them, and the neighbors have to accommodate you, and the city has to now accommodate this development with steps and ramps and spaces that are not pedestrian accessible or not, you can't access from the street. And so
Well,
I have real concerns
can,
about that.
can I just say, I think it puts us in a very difficult position if this is a common approach. And I think here it makes even more sense because and we can get into this with 1152, but they were asked to improve the sidewalks. And so there's no scenario where they're not reestablishing these sidewalks. They're taking out curb cuts for prior overhead doors. So it's a
No,
new
I got that part. I mean, I understand that part of it, but the existing sidewalk is not built up 11 inches. The existing sidewalk is at a certain grade
to be honest with you, I'm a little bit caught off guard, and I would have to explain to them why we went so far down this path, assuming that that was an acceptable solution because we've done it on several other projects. So if that's a no-go, then we just have to go back to the drawing board, but I'm a little caught off guard by it, to be honest.
I don't want you to be caught off guard. I'm pointing out that you already are accommodating ADA access on site for this piece of property. And so I don't understand why the city has to make allowances for this to be developed in a non-traditional way to allow for ADA access of 11 inches or whatever it is, but we don't have a grading plan to know exactly what it is. So let's look at the other building. We're way in the weeds now. Can we look at the other building?
I do. Can I just point out with regard to the ramp that because we are up that plus 11 at the base of the ramp that you're seeing, we only then have to account for 36 inches of change. I mean, we're dealing with a pretty excessive grade change for that existing property. It's about 48 inches above the current top of curb. So while we are accommodating for some of the grade change, the sidewalk is helping us get there without having an excessively long ramp. Okay, so 11, go ahead.
Sorry, Megan. All right, I just wanted to add that these are two separate approval processes. The one that we're about to look at right now, 1152 Magazine Street, that is subject to a conditional use approval. So it's on a different timeline. So we had a lot of discussion about the addition at 1150. That one, it would probably be okay to defer that to allow design changes, but for 1152, we're looking at the conditional use for the standalone wine shop. So hopefully we can look at that as two separate approvals. So Megan, you now have 5 minutes left of your time to present. You can now start for 1152.
Yeah, so 1152, I believe has come across before. We weren't the architectural team working on it at the time. And we sent to Stephen, when we asked if we needed to come back, he was like, has there been a lot of facade modifications proposed? And I mean, it's an existing building, so there's not, we're not proposing blowing off the whole elevation, but there were some variations in what you had seen prior with that front facade. When it came across before, I'll just mention, it was being treated as a single facility related to that indoor amusement conditional use based off of the tenant that they were in discussions with at the time. Since then, it has changed pretty dramatically. The wine shop that's being referenced is the tenant space that's reflected on the downtown side of the building. And that would be one of 5 total tenants that the space is broken out into now, with 2 of the tenants being accessed off of the rear courtyard of 1150 Magazine. And as far as the conditional use for the indoor amusement facility, which was tied to the main property, there have been some recent discussions about maintaining that conditional use with that same tenant potentially on board, but the owners don't have a commitment from that tenant currently. And so at this point in time, the thought is that we will not be maintaining the indoor amusement facility conditional use. The wine shop as a standalone tenant in that location in the building is pursuing their own conditional use process. And we're also not really involved with that conditional use, but are presenting as part of just the requirement of the overall facility. So I'm sorry that's confusing, but there's a lot of moving parts with the conditional use process. So the facade modifications, if we want to go to a view of the elevation. So similarly to 1150, what we're proposing is that the two existing overhead doors get removed and we establish a vestibule entry and have a new storefront double door entry in each of those openings. At the center of the building, we would remove, there's a door currently where the glass door is shown now. The elevation of the door is a bit lower. We would be bringing the door heights up to get kind of a consistent line across the elevation. And then where there are two small punched openings now, we're proposing establishing a new storefront opening. This project is going for tax credits. And so we've had some preliminary discussions with Allison Saunders about this approach. We've already tweaked things a bit based off of their feedback. We were originally proposing eliminating the door altogether, and we're now going to maintain it. They want us to keep this small door that's at the end of the building. It doesn't need to be utilized, but as a remnant of that historic warehouse utilitarian use of the facility. So this is somewhat subject to change based off of when we receive formal Part 2 comments. And then the lower elevation is the back of the building, which we've gotten a BBSA appeal approved to establish the rear of 1150 as a servitude such that we can provide for egress and entryways into these rear tenants. This elevation will not really be visible as that courtyard is shown enclosed with a CMU fence currently.
I had a question about the recesses. How deep are they?
I'm not sure I have an exact number, but I think they're maybe 3'6", so that when you have an out swinging door, it's not swinging into the sidewalk.
Yeah, my concern is, especially given this location, we often encounter security issues with people sleeping in recessed covered openings and urinating. So that is not an architectural concern, but it might be a concern for your client going forward by creating this condition. So generally what happens is people will create these recesses and then they come back because they need security at the front portion of it to prevent people sleeping in the recesses. So you might just want to include that in the programming of it, or bring it, make the recess less deep to give you it's just what you need to swing the doors out.
Yeah, I think we've had this come up before too, and it's a really good point. And I think we're very aware of, you know, the circumstances at that corner currently. So I think that's a good point.
Otherwise, I think the proposal looks good.
again, I just reiterate my eternal advisement to not be afraid of color.
Oh, these are just not color renderings. I hope it's not being interpreted that we intend to paint it white. The buildings are actually, I meant to go back out and get updated pictures, but they've done a lot of painting to both facilities since then. And this one currently is kind of like a mossy green color.
It really does help for us to see the color versions, because when you present something that's white and gray, we assume that it's white and gray. So that's really helpful. My question is, we have two versions of the A202. We have one that shows the door on the right-hand side, on the plan right side, next to the electric meter, and then we have one that shows that door is not there. Which one is the correct one?
This is the correct one. Yeah, I think this is, I actually caught that yesterday that somehow got put on a demo. Yeah, this is the correct one. SHPO wants us to keep that door.
Have y'all done a grading summary, or this is just assuming that the sidewalk will be raised 11 inches?
Yes, correct. The sidewalk would slope up starting at that parking space, and that basically gets you to that first storefront opening at the 11 inches. So it's a 1 to 20 grade slope, and then kind of keeping that elevation all the way across the facade of both buildings, and then transitioning back down to the corner.
So really your slope has to begin in front of that other piece of property because you've got this side door that has to be fully accessible.
Exactly, yeah. But I do think I understand, and I'm sorry if I'm not familiar with the proper means of approval when you do encroach into somebody else's property, but just based off of my recent experience and what I recommended to the owner is just to start that conversation now with that property owner about basically cleaning up their curb cut condition and starting the sidewalk repairs approximately 18 feet into their property. And
I understand. I appreciate y'all's willingness to work with them on that. I just think it's a really bad precedent, and you really can't go off of what you've done before because that may or may not have been allowed with the understanding of all other departments that are affected. And this, what we're seeing here, this is what we're reacting to, not what happened somewhere else. And for this, it is very problematic for me to see us infringing on someone else's public access because of something that you need for your property. It's just, the assumption should always be that you handle your own access in front of your own property, not use other people's public access points. And
yeah,
so,
I think that, I mean, I wish I had some pictures of it, but the sidewalks are in such poor shape everywhere here that I think in addition to my prior experience, I do think what we're proposing, whether it's graded as a ramp or not, I think cleaning up that curb cut condition so that there's not a curb cut that leads directly into the side of the car is.
it's not really helping your case, just to let you know, because the property owner is responsible for that sidewalk. And if it got in that condition, it's kind of their fault. It's not.
So can you explain what the proper steps are?
Property owners are responsible for the maintenance and care of the sidewalk and 18 inches past the curb. So everything from their building line, from the property line to 18 inches into the street past the curb, that's technically the responsibility of the property owner to maintain, not the city.
So if we had like a letter of support from that property owner, I'm just wondering, like, I don't, I want to come back with something that's not.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're gonna have to work with Lewis on this one and just figure out, and I'm probably sure I'll get piped in on it, but that's the whole other part of the weeds that we need to get into, but I think we all kind of understand how I feel about it. I'm not sure how to handle it. Lewis will have to chime in on that one, and that may be just part of the conditions as we go forward to look at voting for it. Okay.
Yeah, what we usually do is require basically a written, basically a letter of, agreement, as you could say, from that property owner, saying that they're okay with the sidewalk modification. That's how we usually handle that.
Yeah, we'll work on that. And I guess my other question is just, I maybe we should take this conversation offline, but I'm a little caught off guard with not being able to manipulate some of those elevations, at least somewhat with the sidewalk. So if that's something new that's not permitted, I think, again, it does kind of drastically change our approach. And so I think, do you recommend reaching out to you directly?
It wouldn't be such an issue if everything was accommodated. You haven't shown us how you're handling the underground utilities. There's the addition that's required. I mean, you're requiring yourself to use property, city property in front of somebody else's property. You haven't shown any public street trees, and so there's a lot of things that aren't being shown. So if we had the whole picture, it would be a whole lot easier. But what I'm reacting to is what we were given. And what we're giving is not meeting what we've even done that we've seen through this process. It's not meeting what I expect to see. And what we expected on other projects to see.
Okay, so can I just ask for some kind of pointed, I got street trees, grading.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be part of the whole thing, but we don't have a landscape plan, so I can't react to that. That includes your public street trees that aren't there. Addressing the existing street tree planting wells, they need to be at 24 square feet of open space, not the current size, which that's not your issue. It's just now that you're doing something to this property, you need to bring those street trees up. You need to have the right number of them. You've got to show us a grading plan that shows what this means. And I think that's information that's going to help drive your costs and keep them low, is know exactly what you're dealing with. We need to know your underground utilities, how these are going to be handled in this proposed scenario. And then really looking at why the ramping and why the access has to be in the public sidewalk when it looks like it's already being accommodated, at least for 1150 internal.
So Megan, I'm Haley. You had previously worked with Joanna on this case, but it's being reassigned to me, so I'll be the planner and I can help work with these issues and coordinate with Danny with Parks and Parkways and get these recommendations over to Bob, our executive director. So Danny, thank you for making those points clear. I've jotted them down and I'll include them in the meeting summary. Is there any more discussion on this item from the committee members? If not, thank you for that, Megan. We will return for a vote after the recess. The next item is number 4, the consideration of the zoning docket 6321 for a property at 600 North Broad Street. We have Brian Knighton signed up to speak on behalf of this application, and Robin Jones is the CPC staff member assigned to this case. Brian, as a reminder, after Robin's presentation, you will have 10 minutes to present.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, good morning, Robin.
Okay, great. This project is an extension of something that the Greenway Venture people did last year in response to the COVID pandemic. They made this wedge-shaped property into an outdoor facility, an outdoor amusement and entertainment facility. At this time, a year later, this project is intended to make permanent that use. Okay. That's what it's for. It's intended to be an outdoor performance venue, perhaps with seating, with ordinary facilities, parking, and whatnot. In my review of the plans, of the site plan at least, what I have what I've identified is that parking area to the left is going to need some landscaping islands, because there's 11 parking spaces on either side of it. That's one thing. I would like some clarification though from the applicant when it's time for him to talk about exactly what the surfacing is in the seating area, both currently what it is, because I've looked at all kinds of aerial photographs and I just can't tell. So that would be helpful if I could get if I could find out what the actual surface is. Let's see if there's anything else. In terms of setback and those kind of dimensional issues, there really aren't a lot. There aren't any requirements for non-residential uses in the proposed MU1 zoning district. Non-residential uses don't have pretty much any setback requirements and what have you at all. And let me step back a minute to talk about this proposed MU1 zoning. In conjunction with this conditional use petition is a zoning change petition to take this property from being HUMU mixed use to MU1 mixed use. The difference being the difference being is that this type of outdoor facility is not permitted in the HUMU district, but it is in the MU1 district. It's permitted as a conditional use. So the applicant has submitted, concurrent applications to both rezone the property, and if that's successful, then to seek conditional use approval for the proposed use. I also noticed that there are street trees along the Lafitte Street side, but I'm not seeing any along the Toulouse Street side. So that might need to be addressed. And that's about all I've been able to identify.
Okay, thank you, Robin. Brian, you now have 10 minutes to present.
Okay, I'll actually, I'll just answer some of those questions, but the architect, Jonathan Mercantile, he's also on this call. So he'll probably be the one to go over the design. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So the seating area, you asked what's the ground. The ground it's just a limestone, a 610 limestone. And that area is, approximately probably 3,000 square feet or so.
Okay.
I'm not 100% sure on that number.
That's fine. That's
Yeah.
I can scale that out to find out the square footage. I just couldn't figure out the surface.
Yeah, so that was all concrete. That was in a pretty rough shape. So we took all that out. This used to be a junkyard. And then about where your entrance is, right behind the parking lot, that line approximately is where from there forward to Broad, we've been using it for the Broad Theater parking. I own the Broad Theater, and I also own this. Greenway Ventures was just something I purchased it, but this is a Broad Theater sort of side project.
Right.
It managed to keep all of our employees busy during the pandemic, which was great. But there was, just as an aside, the response has been very positive. People want this to continue. We want this to continue. So that's why we're proposing for these zoning changes, et cetera. But I'll probably let Jonathan take it from here unless there's a very specific, business related question. Jonathan, you there?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Just to continue on the sort of surface item that Robin posed a question to, the intent is to have essentially all pervious surfaces except for the roofs. This does put us above the 5,000 square foot threshold, so we will be providing stormwater management on site. I think we have ample space to do that, so it's not a concern, but we have our roof area has exceeded that number through the development of the project. Robin kind of summarizes it pretty well. This is an extension to an already existing outdoor facility. What it's proposing to do is to provide an open to the public side, which includes this seating garden and food truck accessibility, as well as a bar. There's a sort of defining line that separates one side, the public side, from the sort of outdoor entertainment venue side. And so there is a point where you would need to purchase a ticket to enter the larger stage area. You would then have access to that same bar just from the other side of it. And then restrooms are provided to each side as well. This includes parking on the broad side of the development, and that parking also would be intended to be pervious. The intent from Brian's perspective, as I understand it, is to develop this whole lot eventually. However, this is phase one, which is essentially developing the center of the property. The structure itself is fairly open air. There's a series of kind of sawtooth roofs that the primary roof is oriented to kind of catch, help to catch sound and to direct sound into the seating area for the outdoor stage and keep it more or less contained there. And then the smaller roofs are responding to that from a design standpoint. The idea is to allow air to flow through, keep cross breezes going, to keep the conditions comfortable. And the security will be provided by the perimeter fencing and gate system there. So at night it will be locked down from the exterior. The structure is primarily wood with a steel post and beam primary structure and corrugated metal roofing on top. The area is fairly industrial surrounding it, so we feel like this does fit in well to that. I think that the broadside development, which would be up and coming phase, will sort of have a more, I guess, finished and commercial look to it, but that's not really what we're reviewing here. I think that that's a basic summary. Can open it up to discussion.
Hey there. So before I provide any comments, I'm just trying to understand what exists versus what's being proposed, because the documents say it's phase one, but I believe you all did say that there is something existing there now. So can you kind of just outline for me and the committee in general what on this site plan exists and what is being proposed?
I
So
Hey, Joseph, excuse me for one second. would an aerial photograph of a current aerial photograph help?
I
Not
mean,
really.
it would, but it's not in the submitted set, so we could just let the applicant kind of
Okay.
outline what's on
All
the
right.
plan.
Yeah, I'll take it, Jonathan. So if you go, I guess that's it. So basically, where you see this in the, if you can enlarge it, maybe, yeah. So just to your cursor to the right, that's the existing stage. All this sort of limestone seating area. Some of those trees actually are existing now, and then where we have this new facility.
Brian, sorry, I don't mean to cut you off, but I did enable annotation for others. So if you're able to annotate using the Zoom functionality, feel free to do so.
I'm not very familiar with Zoom. It's very simple. I could, and maybe Jonathan can do it. But basically, there is a shipping container there that we use as a ticket office, and there is a 20-foot long trailer, like a concession trailer that we use to sell concessions out of. And then on this Lafitte side, right by the handicap ramp down there at the, we have a series of restrooms. We have, I think, 6 portalettes. So right now we're serving our concessions out of a trailer, and then we have portalettes set up. And then there's a blue container that acts as our ticket office. And then it's fenced off all the way around. But other than that, that's it.
So there's currently no on-street parking. Off-street parking.
Oh, yeah. There is. They're in front of that. There are, I think, 30 or 32 parking spaces now, but it's also an odd, the lot is 90 feet wide at some points, 95 feet wide. So the parking is not configured very well. So I think what Jonathan has done is, configured the parking properly. But there currently is 32 spots there. Yeah.
Okay. So this does represent basically a wholesale redevelopment of the site.
Correct.
Okay, thanks. So I'll just preface my comments by saying that, one, that, we understand that systemic and kind of city initiated things require infrastructure to better enable property owners to develop their site in accordance with the goals and intents of various districts and zone and overlay districts in the city. That said, considering this site's in a, let me get the exact terminology, a Greenway Corridor Design Overlay District, and is right by, I know it's separated by, I believe, the DPW, a city-owned site. That said, it's in such a central and located bikeable part of the city. I'm kind of more so confused and trying not to be offended at the site's kind of just complete disregard for pedestrian and mostly bicycle access. I mean, you have a parking structure that I believe is where, So you have a off-street parking lot that is basically the first kind of approach that anyone would make from the Broad Street side, which again is how most people coming from the Greenway would access it. Then you have a lot of on-street parking, which of course you're allowed, but just kind of further is defensive, in my opinion, of kind of that bicycle access. And I haven't spent much time with these plans, but I haven't seen any even bicycle racks. And so I don't think the site and proposal as designed is meeting the intents of the design overlay district that you're in. That said, I will say that the green space and the built structure and the kind of concert area is all very well designed, and I feel very hospitable. But everything around that is not, and it's too oriented for vehicular habitation. And so that's what I'll just provide. I don't know if any other committee members have any other comments, but
can I respond to
that? Sure.
There we do, right where you have this entrance here on the Lafitte Street side. There is bike parking planned for that location, and currently we have bike parking in the front of what's the current setup. There's bike parking in the front, but that right where that entrance is, there is bike parking we're going to put in that location.
Can you
Right,
draw that with the annotation, please?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Can you draw with using annotation? Can you
Yeah.
draw that and show us where it's going to be? Because I don't see it.
I don't think it's currently on there, but this is something that we are adding on. It's right. Jonathan, can you do it right at this sort of Lafitte entrance? This area is covered. And so that is the ideal location for bike parking. That is an entrance from the Lafitte Street side. So we
right.
would put
I
bike
will
parking
say,
right
as,
there.
as my former committee member said, we review what's in front of us and it's not shown. So
Right.
intentions doesn't really go much for us. And I think, again, I think having food truck install space is great, but again, where is it located? It's located on the approach from Broad, which I'm glad we went to this plan. It's a further kind of vehicular oriented place that frankly, me as a biker would have a hard time accessing. And so I think this needs, I'm going to say a major redesign, but again, I defer to my other committee members because I am just one voice on this committee.
Well, I think it can be, I think the bike, the concept is pretty solid, and I'm looking at the aerial photo that shows what's there now. And there's several pieces of property, so I'm not sure how that's handled, but overall, I think the concept is pretty solid. It's the details that are tripping you up, where the parking lot doesn't meet the zoning code, and it really isn't. We're not even seeing the sidewalk connections very well, at least not in this set. Maybe that shows up a little bit better. It's all about performance space, which we appreciate you giving us that information, but we also need to know, how do people get into this property and how do they move around and get from the public realm? And so I think Joseph's point is pretty solid in that bicycle access, that's going to be a huge draw for you, because it's this draw for other performance venues that are along the Greenway. One of the things too, we don't have a landscape plan, which is problematic at best. And I think a landscape architect would have solved some of these problems for you. But you've got to have street trees for Toulouse, as well as the ones on Lafitte. You're going to need them on Broad and the rest of Lafitte when you do the other two phases. I'm not sure what they're going to be, but you'll still need to have the street trees installed there. So I just wanted to point out that we don't have a landscape plan to react to.
The site plan does call out.
I'm going to stop you right there. You know as well as I do that in Louisiana, that is not the law. The law is that you provide us with a landscape plan, not a site plan. Site plan cannot call out plants. And I know I'm being picky about it, but you cannot do that. It's against the law. So just comply, please.
Sure.
I would like to point out, I'm sorry. I would like to point out that within the Greenway corridor, the pedestrian and vehicular entry point should be oriented towards the Greenway. And I see that the new outdoor green space is fronting more on Toulouse Street, and you have more of the food truck and vehicle stuff towards Lafitte Avenue. And I'm just kind of wondering how how the food trucks would access that location. And I see a possibility of redesigning the parking areas. I was wondering how it came to the determination that you would have two-way curb cuts. And if you wanted to reduce that down to a one-way, you would potentially have some more space to design a place where food trucks can pull in and have a separate space than where the pedestrian access would be.
Wouldn't it be the same? I mean, it'd be the same parking lot, even one way, right?
The drive lane would be narrowed, or you would
I think it's still 24 feet if you have two parking. The direction doesn't matter.
Okay, so,
It's just, I think it's more about the cars backing up.
okay,
If it were one way, I guess we would be, we would have the flexibility to angle the parking, and then
Yeah,
that
that-
could reduce the width there.
That's true. You'd have a little less parking though.
but just adding some internal pedestrian circulation like was already mentioned. And having just clearly defined pedestrian and bicycle entry points that are separate from the vehicles and the food trucks.
Yeah, I just looked up Article 22(8)D. It does appear that one-way traffic aisle should be a minimum of 12 feet, and then two-way traffic aisle should be a minimum of 24 feet in width. Robin, the sign planner, can of course connect you with any and all relevant CZO citations that would potentially help.
That's only for areas that don't have parking along them. If you have the head-end parking, then you have to have the 24 feet along. You know what I mean?
Because you have to pull in and back out.
Yeah, it's right. It's in a different section.
And one thing to note, I guess, about how the parking is currently arranged, it is, not only is it seeking to provide parking for this current project, but also for future phase 2, which is sort of the idea behind its location, that it will be able to kind of serve the future commercial space, and then that commercial space will also sort of create a barrier between it and Broad Street at that point. We are beginning to think about how that corner would open up. Joseph, to your point about approaching from Broad. So there are thoughts there, and your points about the bicycle approach and facility is taken for sure.
Yeah, so I'll just say that I think at this point, I would be in favor of a traffic diagram or plan just beyond just providing bicycle racks. That said, this is either to the applicant or to Robin, the sign planner, is parking even required in this district or for this use?
There are parking requirements. I'll have to pull up my report again, but in the requested MU1 district, on-street parking is required. I had done the calculations for, well, what I believe to be the for what this use needed, okay? And going by the at the time I didn't have a really good site plan when I did the draft for the report. But if I'm not mistaken, I think this use and the square footage of this use and what have you required something like 17 off-street parking spaces, and which, again, according to what I was looking at the time, was easily accomplished, as it is on this site plan that I'm looking at now. But also in MU1, on-street parking counts as well. And
Okay, yeah,
and
because
there's a lot of that on Lafitte Street.
I will of course never instruct the applicant to do something that's not required by law. I will say that personally, I don't think I question about the need for this much off-street parking, and at the end of the day, that it really should not be one of the predominant visual or site elements in this location, in this design overlay district.
You think there's could any of this be resolved with like a corral on Toulouse or Lafitte?
Okay, thank you for letting me know that. I appreciate it. Right.
Hi, I
Um,
can hear the background noise if we can all mute our microphones.
Okay, I got it.
Louis, what are you meaning by a corral?
Like a lot of bike parking in the parking lane, or even like building a curb extension and putting it on top of that. I don't know if that satisfies anything in the planning term, but just as almost as a way to like you could replace parking spots in the parking lot with bike parking, but then it's still kind of bikes are going through the parking lot. Maybe putting like a lot of bike corral, using like 2 or 3 spaces even, right at an entrance, real close to a street entrance, may even be like an improvement on that.
Yeah, certainly. We would definitely be open to that for sure.
But just letting you know that's that could be an option.
Louis, does having the access, I mean, I really like the idea of having these pull-in stalls for the food trucks. I think that's really, I really like that. I want you to know that. My question though is, does that count as a driveway, or does that just count as kind of how does that work?
Probably counts as like an off-street loading zone.
And
with a driveway.
There's currently a mountable curb at that street, and so the idea was just to leave it as existing, reserve those spots, and the trucks could pull over the sidewalk into there.
Now, this is for Robin or Louis. This again, I'm a fan of this food truck pull off. I don't know if this is the correct orientation, because would this classify as a excessive curb cut width or amount thereof? Because it also appears that they're having a curb cut and a loading zone, and that feels like a kind of traffic conflict.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not really not really a loading zone, probably. I mean, we have some other places where we have signed loading zone at off-street loading zones. So it certainly wouldn't be the first thing like that. And, maybe we do that here too. But yeah, I mean, I wouldn't get hung up on it. It could be done either way. If it's like if it's an obvious driveway, we probably wouldn't, sign it. But, we do it in some larger, some larger driveways, in the back of like office buildings and stuff. We've done it before.
And there probably would need to be some kind of permeable material put in that parkway as they're going across it, just so that it wasn't, the wheels don't get stuck in the grass.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of it being as excessive width, you may have a point. I mean, that's also controlled by zoning, at least halfway, since it appears in the zoning code. So, we usually want to see a variance too for that, if y'all think it's a driveway.
May I say something just about where the orientation of the food trucks and why they're there? This, just to the right of this entrance, that is the main signage for the business. That looks like the visual entrance from the Greenway. I'm not sure what page it's on, but that's why they're there. And if we were to move it to the other side, it would sort of lose that wall where we would have that entrance, wherever that may be. If you go back, yeah, right.
That's the one that says broadside. Yeah, that one that
Correct.
says broadside, right?
Correct. And we had discussed post you guys receiving these plans, but to put bike parking right along this wall right there. I mean, this is set back off of the sidewalk. I don't know how many feet, but it's an ideal location for additional bike parking. We could easily secure it with cameras. It is an entrance. So it's that the orientation of the business is facing the Greenway. Although you are right next to the gas station, so you can't see a whole lot from the Greenway, and the growth of the Greenway too is sort of really obscures the view of this facility, but mainly the gas station.
So again, I think I'm gonna advise a kind of holistic approach about how much bike parking conflicts with vehicle circulation and parking. That said, if the food truck were to remain in this location, it looks like I see some of the details with the seats in the vehicle in this elevation, which is, you know, a nice touch, but it appears to be open air. And so like, how would you control non-food truck parking at that location? Because we do live in New Orleans, and if people see a parking space, they will park there.
I guess the same way you would handle any loading zone parking, right? I mean, if someone parks in a loading zone, I guess you would have to call whomever you would call. But the plan is also to have at least one of these food trucks permanently there. So either we would operate it, or we would just let others operate it, and then have sort of a rotating food truck at that other location. So one of those spots will likely not move as often as the other. And the plan is, to invite outside folks in.
Miguel is having some audio difficulties. We wanted to ask what phase 2 was going to include.
Phase 2, which would be the front here of the property, that is going to be probably a 2-story, retail on the bottom. I don't know, maybe apartments up top, maybe a 3-story structure. Something that has more of a daytime use, doctor's office. I do have a dentist who's interested in the space. It's only about 5 bays. Once you take this sort of soft corner, it's really only about 4 to 5 bays. So something like that, something just retail on the bottom.
Okay. Otherwise, I don't have any concerns with the proposed design. I think it looks really interesting.
Thank you.
I would like to just point out that a loading space must be at least 35 feet in length, and these seem a little bit shy of that. Also, they are not allowed to be located in the front yard, so these are slightly projecting in front of the building line, so that would be technically within the front yard. So I think we need to look at whether these are considered loading spaces where the food trucks would be, because they do not meet the size requirement. Although your site constraints are determined by you, you can pull that front line up into the outdoor area.
Yeah, you may want to just call them, could they just be called parking spaces?
I think this is going to be a safety and permits determination. So Robin, you can work with the applicant to have safety and permits determine what that space would be considered.
Right.
Okay. All right. Is there any other conversation from any other committee members? Thank you. If not, we will be moving on to item number 5, design review docket 7521 for a project at the Audubon Zoo. This is a renovation of an outdoor amphitheater. It requires the DAC review because it is a public project. We have Mike Johnson signed up to speak on behalf of this application. Mike, you now have 10 minutes to present.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm pinch hitting for Mike today. He's on personal time off. Tracy Lee with SQ Dumas Ripple Architects, representing the Audubon Commission, our client. This is the stage pavilion that's within the confines of the zoo. It's within the zoo grounds. And if you've been to the zoo in the last 35 years, you've seen it. And in your packet, if you turn to sheet 1.51, you'll see some existing photos of it. The Audubon folks,
Sorry, what page number is that?
1.51. And I think you'll recognize it right away. The Audubon folks have secured, let's see if you go toward, there you go. Yeah. The Audubon folks have secured some funding in return for naming rights, and they're matching it with some of their own funding to upgrade and update this thing. And there's some functional things that we're doing with it. But they also asked us to kind of take a look at freshening it up and updating the design to kind of bring it into the 21st century. It was built in the mid 80s, and it has this kind of postmodern pediment that's the defining feature. It has a copper roof, which is in good condition, and the stage itself is cast in place concrete, which is in okay condition. We're proposing to resurface it. The rest, and it's a steel and concrete structure, and all that's in great shape. But the pediment and this kind of apron element are wood, and they're rotted out badly. So the proposal is to the intervention is to kind of try to lighten it up a little bit. It's architecturally sort of heavy and a little bit oppressive. So the idea is to scrape away some of that wood, which needs to be replaced anyway, and raise the structure a little bit and just kind of lighten up the whole thing. There also exists some paving in the foreground, which is in really bad condition. It looks to me like asphaltic concrete. It looks like parking lot paving. It's in really bad shape. They call it the dance floor, and they wanted to maintain that. So we're proposing to replace it with concrete and a slightly smaller footprint. And I'm prepared to answer any questions that the committee may have.
Is there any discussion on this item? Okay, if not, we will move on to item number 6. This is design review docket 7621 for a project at the Treme Center at 900 North Billary Street. The proposal is to add an elevator to the front of the existing building facade. The reason that this requires DAC review is because it's a public project, and we have Greg DeCourcy signed up to speak on behalf of this application. Greg, you now have 10 minutes.
Sure, thank you. The elevator is being installed by Capital Projects for ADA access to the second floor. I think I probably should tell you why it's located where it's located. The building footprint is pretty large, but the bulk of that footprint are the gymnasium and the swimming pool, which are 2-story spaces. The second floor is actually more of a mezzanine. It has a dance area, a crafts area, an office, some mechanical space, and a fitness area. Most of that second floor is along the North Billary side of the building. There is like a area that goes toward the back of the building. It's not too wide. We looked at areas both inside and outside as a place to locate the elevator. Inside was pretty problematic just because of the way it's set up. There was a space on the second floor that looked promising, but the locker rooms for the swimming pool were right underneath it. With situations like that where we couldn't line up the first and second floor too well to make things work. In addition to the fact that doing construction like that inside the building would have been pretty disruptive to the function of the building. And so we got to where we were looking outside pretty much. And again, with the swimming pool and the gym taking up most of the perimeter of the building, there weren't too many opportunities to locate the elevator. It really, without putting it inside of spaces like inside the dance area, we ended up either at this entrance on North Villery Street or its mirror image on the back of the building. I should note, and actually this is Capital Project's preferred location. We are obviously taking this building entrance out of service. And I won't say people don't use it, they do, but I will also say the main entrance to the building is right around the corner there at the left. And so, I mean, people have to get used to using, people who use that North Villery entrance will have to get used to using the other entrance. But code, I should mention code wise, there are, as far as exit width, this building has plenty of exits, and even removing this exit from service, we still exceed the required exit width by code. There was one other code issue, so to speak, that came up. The craft area, which is on the far right hand side of the second floor, there used to be a door connecting that to the dance area that was removed in the last renovation. We're having to put that back because to keep exiting within the maximum allowable distance to exit. So coming from that area and down the stair, rather than making a U-turn and going out the door, they'll have to go to the main entrance. We would have liked to have the elevator off to one side and kept the door there, but there are pile caps on either side of that opening that would interfere with the elevator pit if we had done that. And so we're centered in that opening. We're putting windows on either side, but there's not enough room to keep a door there. The building is poured concrete. It's white. We're going back with for the hoistway. We're going back with reinforced CMU with cement plaster finish, texture and color to match, to be similar to the existing. I don't know if you can ever get an exact match. Windows. We're using the same framing, window types, basically keeping the same look as the original building.
I have a couple of questions for you. And I'll just preface it by saying I'm very aware of this building. It was my project when I was in Capital Projects. And this area right here that I'm circling in green, that's where the elevator was supposed to go. So I'm curious as to why y'all didn't put it in there.
Well, that's one of the areas considered. They've since made a practice room for musical interest in there. I asked about moving it, and I was told it cannot be moved.
That's not to me, I'm sorry, that's not a good excuse. It's a music practice room, and I understand that it's been soundproofed and it's been made, but there are other spaces in the building. And you're closing off the entrance that is the address for this building. And I'm telling you right now, I can't vote to approve this because this area of the building where this room is and where I've circled in green, that's where the elevator is supposed to be. And so I don't understand why it's not being put in where it was supposed to be. So I can't accept that closing off of the entry that is the address for the building, is the front of the building, is an acceptable alternative. I'm sorry, I just can't do it.
To the applicant, is there a elevation in this set. I'm not seeing one currently, and I think that would also help us tremendously.
There should be. Sheet A3.1 has an elevation. We had also submitted after this set a sheet with a photograph and the corresponding elevation. I'm not sure if it's.
Joseph, only sheet S2.2 shows a little bit of an axiometric view.
I appreciate the sheet numbers. Can someone send me an actual number page? Like, is it page two?
It's like 18.
Oh, thank you so much.
I mean, you're going to have to do a lot of accommodation on the building facade to, since the second floor doesn't overhang and the door is actually recessed, so you're going to have to do some structural accommodation anyway.
Yes.
So that's, if you're going to do that accommodation and you had to have it on the exterior, I don't know why it can't be on the right-hand side of the stairwell and in that play area with the new sidewalk leading up to it if necessary, or however you need to get to the access route. But since it's internal, there's no reason why it can't be in the playground area if you're going to have to do some physical modifications to the facade without having to close off that door. I just don't get that.
Yeah, we're just trying to stay out of the meeting room.
But the meeting room, isn't there a hallway right there? Am I not looking
Well,
at
the hallway
plan?
is by the hallway's outside of the stair, but once you get past the stair, you're in the meeting room.
But there's
Well, Danny, to this point, is there a second floor plan we can see in this set?
yeah, that if you go up,
After this.
go to sheet 2, and you can see there's on the second floor there is there are small rooms as you go into what I think is still the dance studio probably, and but there's smaller spaces in there. You know, that door into the dance area would need to be moved over to accommodate it. And I know what you're saying, like in the meeting room, that does create where they're going into the meeting room, but closing off a main entry to me is really problematic.
Is there an elevation drawing showing how it impacts the front of the building?
Just that one little axiometric on 18.
Yeah, I feel like we need to have a drawing showing, I mean, is that, what are the materials? I don't know.
Yeah, as I said, I had sent an additional sheet with the photograph and the corresponding elevation, but I guess that didn't make it into the package.
Greg, what email address did you send that to? Because I know I requested the information, but I did not see that it had been provided.
Sure, if you give me a second,
For this, can we take an exception where it can be forwarded to you, or
I mean, I don't know which way we're going to vote on it, but I think it's my opinion that we're going to have some pretty strong requests for revisions that I think it's likely, whether it's approved or deferred, that can just be included in the next set.
okay, that's
I don't want to speak for anyone else. That's just my opinion.
Okay, well, is there any more discussion from the committee members before we move on to the next item? We'll come back after the recess and we can provide any.
I do have a question, and I know I'm being a little, I'm trying to clear this. How do I clear this out? Oh, there. So was there any thought, or did y'all do any studies, Greg, on pulling that elevator a little bit further out and creating more of an entry vestibule with a small bridge going over to the building so that you don't lose the building itself as being that entry to the building?
We did initially look at that, but I mean, basically restricted by the budget. As it is, we had to pause this project for a good while, so capital projects could go find additional funding to make it work like this.
I just, well, this building has such, maybe I'm a little too involved with this building, but it has such a very strong architectural form from that time period. Built, you know, it was built in the early 70s, 1975, 74, 75, 76. And it has a very distinct facade. And this is basically just kind of completely ignoring that and saying, we're just going to close this off and create this one little block that doesn't necessarily tie the building together. It does not fit the architecture of the building. It's just it's a big concern for me. This building is crazy expensive to operate, and it's really the most energy inefficient building I've ever been in my entire life.
Mm-hmm.
But it does have a very distinct architectural style that works with the entire campus that it's located on. And if you're going to be digging, you're still going to run into the same problems wherever you put it. There's a lot of issues underground there. And so I'm a little flabbergasted, actually. And it's not your fault, Grant. I know it's not. There are very limited options, and I just don't like this one.
On the bright side, we're using augured cast in place piles so that we don't crack the pool.
Yeah, and the other thing is too, you know, you're gonna have to call the, it's a archaeologically protected site, so you have to pull in an archaeologist for that.
Yeah,
work.
we have that in the spec that they'll need to be on site for excavation
Okay.
and augering.
That was the other reason why I was like, if you go in the playground area, we've already dug all that up, and you don't have to dig it up. You don't have to worry about what's dug up. So.
Had there been any consideration to doing a building addition to encompass the elevator and create a secondary entry point at a different location?
Yeah, unfortunately, to avoid being in, you know, having the elevator in a working usable space, and the way the building's configured now, we're really, for the exterior application, we're pretty limited to either this spot or the mirrored spot on the back side of the building. Again, as far as creating a bigger, kind of construction and pulling it away, making more space, I would have loved to do that, but again, we were budget limited.
Greg, let me ask you this. Why can't you just put it in the stairwell over here?
On the other side?
Yeah.
Because on the second floor, there's a mechanical room that's on the outside face of that stair.
What do you mean on the outside face?
There's a mechanical space there.
That's in the interior of the stairwell?
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't remember that. Well, that's a good reason why it can't be there. I know the attic access is there, but I didn't remember the mechanical being there. And there's no way to do a lift internally, just a hydraulic lift up to the mezzanine level and in the main entry where the front desk is.
I suppose that's a possibility.
You know, like a little push lift that basically would take you from the ground level up to that. It wouldn't block any of the spaces really, and just reconfiguring a front desk versus rebuilding or closing off a main entry. I'm done harassing you.
Okay, all right. Is anyone else?
I'm not
want
that
to
sensitive.
Throw in some comments? If not, we're going to move on to the next item, number 7, design review 7721. This is on St. Andrew Episcopal Schools campus at 8000 Oak Street. There's an existing basketball court in the center of the campus, and the applicant is proposing to add what's considered an accessory structure. It would be a cover over the existing basketball court. This is the representative for the applicant is Catherine Fitzpatrick, and Aspen Nero is the CPC staff member. So Aspen, if you can give us a quick overview, and then Catherine, you'll have 10 minutes to present.
Yeah, so as Haley stated, this is just a shade structure that's going to go over an existing basketball court. We're treating it as an accessory structure, so it still needs to comply with the setback requirements of no more than 3 feet from a required rear yard, interior yard. So they look to be meeting those requirements. The only request is that we get a little bit more site information as far as the setbacks from other accessory buildings on the site, but that's it from a zoning perspective.
I just wanted to add that this is in a full control historic district, and the HDLC reviewed the proposed shade structure, and it got approved by the commission. And I think the drawing is mislabeled. I think it's on Carrollton Avenue, not St. Charles Avenue. So I just wanted to make sure that's
correct. That's a, I guess you could call that a typo. It should be Carrollton.
My only question, are we to the question part?
Catherine, actually, you now have 10 minutes to present.
Okay.
Well, I'll quickly say a few things. St. Andrew's Episcopal School, we're the oldest Episcopal school in the city of New Orleans, and we don't have a gym. So we have this basketball court, and it's an absolute oven during the hotter months. And then when our students cross campus during the rain, they get soaking wet. So this will be a great benefit to our school. It's also very high for students to play volleyball and basketball. So from the backside of school on Short Street, you can get full view to Carrollton Avenue. It's going to be that high that it won't obstruct any views from the residents. And I've spoken to them, and they're fine with it. But that is why we need the shade covering. It's for heat and rain events. And also the columns will be padded, so if children run into them, they will not get hurt. That's another added benefit of the shade structure.
Yeah, Catherine, my only question is are you sold on that blue, or would you be willing to go with a lighter color? Because I think you'll get a better reflectivity and a cooler sight if you go with something that's more along the cream or white color pattern selections. If you go to the number 8 down there, Joseph, there's some lighter colors. The blue, we found the blue to be 2 things. Blue gets really hot underneath there. We're having problems in Palmer Park because sometimes it gets kind of hot underneath that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Palmer Park is still blue, if I remember right. And it looks like a FEMA tarp from a distance. So that the blue color ends up looking like a big FEMA tarp.
And what color do you recommend, sir?
I was just, some of the lighter color, like they have a natural or a desert sand.
Uh-huh.
And even that steel gray or the river gum, the blue just absorbed, it ends up getting pretty hot underneath there. And the reds also get pretty warm. the blue should stay cooler, but even if you go with like the sky blue, it's better than the aquatic blue because it does get really, that fabric gets hot. And so, you know, just a thought to look at. I don't have any issues with the whole shade structure itself. It's just
The color.
the darker colors, they use them up north a lot. For us, the natural desert sand, maybe, you know, like even the sky blue would be better. But just look at your colors in terms of color selections, just because of the heat. Even the red post, if the padding, whatever color padding you, I would still offsetting the maintenance of a lighter color. The lighter color is still going to remain cooler over time.
Even for the posts, even for the posts.
Even for the posts, because
Yeah.
the posts are going to be in the sun and they're going to get really hot, and you don't want your kids to, you know, lean against them and get burnt.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. That's an easy fix.
Yeah, I just, you know, just look at your color palette and say, hey, you know, this works. And your buildings are all kind of that cream and white light colors anyway, so I think it would work with your campus a little bit.
Yes, we have we have one cream building on our campus, but it's going to be right. I agree. I agree. Thank you very much.
Okay, that was it.
Are there any other questions?
Eleanor, does the change in color impact at all the HDLC review? We'll have to circle back up on that. I'm not sure that it would. So if there's no other discussion from the committee members, we will now move on to the last item, because again, item number 8 has been withdrawn. So item number 9 is a non-CPC item that was submitted by the Department of Parks and Parkways. This is the AP Toro Civil Rights Memorial Park, and it includes sign and landscaping improvements. Do we have a representative signed up to speak on behalf of this application?
Hey, this is Carrie Maggia with Perez. I also have Brandon Adams on the phone, who's our landscape architect representing the project. Not sure if his audio is working though. So
it's working better now.
Hey, Brandon. Okay, I'm going to defer to Brandon for speaking on behalf of the design team. Thank you.
Okay, so what this, you know what? I'm sorry, I'm getting feedback. I've been having some audio problems in terms of being able to hear. Now I've got it on my phone, so I'm getting feedback off my phone on my audio. I don't know if anybody else has had any problems in terms of hearing. Sorry, I'm just going to have to turn my phone off. And so I might not be able to hear comments. So what can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, I see a head shaking. Basically what we're doing in this project, I don't know if we have any existing photographs with this presentation. I guess no, it's just the drawings. Okay,
There aren't any with
basically,
the
this is an existing memorial of A.P. Road in the 7th Ward, and what we're doing is we're actually this project started off as kind of a small project, and it just kind of grew and grew and grew until we're doing basically a complete renovation of this project. And what we're doing is we're moving. There's some curbing, circular curbing around. This is the existing site. It's being shown right here. We're moving the existing curbing in plants around the statue, and also there's some granite panels that are broken and that are engraved with text. We're removing all of those, and we're reconstructing in the same configuration of the existing site a low wall that the top of the wall will be at the same at the top of the platform where the statue. So maybe we can go to the proposed site. So this is the proposed site. As you can see, there's a wall around, a circular wall, low wall. It goes around. They'll have plantings that are between the low wall and the statue area. And on the low wall, there will be plaques, smaller plaques that go around to describe a number of other local civil rights leaders from New Orleans. And it describes their career and their life. So not only is this memorial going to be a dedication to A.P. Terode, civil rights leader, but us other individuals as well will be described on the plaques that surround the memorial. I guess some of the other features that the low walls will be with a precast coping on top of them, and the walls themselves will be concrete with integral administered colored concrete and with a light sandblast finish. And then we'll have new pavers to go around as well. There's new landscaping. There'll be ground covers, like a low ground cover around the statue area, and in front of the statue will be a flowering seasonal material and a larger plaque that describes A.P. Trudeau. And these are bronze plaques. And then, so in addition to that, we were going to be surrounding the site with sweet bay magnolia trees to kind of enclose it. Let's see what else. We have all new site furniture. And the site furniture matches the type of site furniture that Parks and Parkways usually specifies, with new benches and new trash receptacles. I believe that's probably it. I'm going to try to get my computer speaker back on so I can hear. Okay. I guess if you can go to the other drawings, the next drawing. Okay, this is a section that shows the rectangular area actually represents the statue, which the statue is going to be restored, and there's a method. I actually talked to the original artist that of the statue. You can probably go to the next page. Maybe the next page after that. I'm sorry. There it is. Okay. So you can see in the lower left-hand corner the existing statue. So we're going to restore the statue itself because it's gotten to be, the bronze material has gotten to be kind of corroded and not really damaged, but just the finish itself needs to be restored. And there's a method they use where they actually use a torch and wax and buffing. And then after that's cleaned, it's cleaned that way, waxed, it'll be varnished, like 2 coats of varnish on it to protect it. So you can go to the next. These are all the plaques that surround the site to describe the other civil rights leaders that we're dedicating this memorial to. And these would be smaller plaques that surround along the low wall that surrounds the statue area. I think that's about it. I guess any questions? And I've worked with Danny with Parks and Parkways on this project. So Danny's very familiar with it.
Yeah, I just wanted to point out that the existing site furnishings will be reused on site. We talked about that. They're gonna be
Yeah.
repainted.
The restore, yeah, well, that's right. We're putting them in different locations, putting them further down along the sidewalk.
And we won't be losing any main trees, I don't believe, right? Isn't that the
No,
case?
we're transplanting. There are some trees and smaller trees that we want to put make it very simple and formal by having this surrounded with the bay magnolia trees. So we're taking those trees and relocating them in the park,
right
nearby in the park. So those trees will be transplanted.
What height will the plaques be mounted at?
I'm sorry. I'm gonna have this. I know this is weird. I'm gonna have to get close to my monitor so I can hear you again. Could you say it again, please?
I'm just wondering, for readability purposes, what height the plaques would be mounted at and what size the text font is.
The plaque. If you can go, if you go back, I'm not sure what sheet it's on.
It's on sheet 5 or 6.
There's actually a section
Shows it.
there. Are you talking about the main plaque, the AP Trudeau plaque, or the smaller
The
plaque?
ones that would be the 9 or so that you have surrounding the statue.
Oh, the ones that surround the statue? And you're asking what size?
Where, for readability purposes, are they mounted? What height are they mounted at?
There is a detail, I believe it shows. So if you go to L7, sheet L7. Okay. Yeah. Okay. L7. You can see that the plaque itself is 12 by 18. The text, I believe, is a 1/4 inch. It's about as small as you can get, but you can still read it, but you can't get any smaller for them to be able to actually engrave it or put it on the plaque. In other words, there's a minimum height of the text that you can get, but it's definitely readable because I printed out a proof of it myself and stood back to look at it to make sure I could read it. Because there is a lot of text to put on there.
And did you read it from a position standing up, or how
You
far
read it
from your?
Yeah, you read it from standing up. You're looking down. The wall is probably about 3 feet high. So, and it's on the coping on top of that. So you're standing up and you're looking down at it as an angle where you're reading it. It's kind of similar to at the Freedom Tower site, the World Trade Center site, where they have all the names of all the individuals, and they have it's a low wall with and it's tilted, it's angled, so that when you're standing there, you can read it.
Okay.
Haley, it's also within the it's within that ADA accessible range. So if you're actually in a chair, it's supposed to be at the right height for that as well.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Now the main plaque, the plaque in front of it is much larger. I mean, it's I'm not sure what the dimension is. What's the dimension? So the letters in that one will be more like, I think they're like 3/4 of an inch high, because there's a lot of text, and that's the main one that's in front of the statue itself.
Do we have any further discussion on this item?
Yeah,
Excuse me?
Haley, well, to the applicant, I just wanted to say, this is a very lovely design, and I really feel like it'll elevate what exists. Um, and so I'm just thankful that Haley kind of had the line of inquiry that I was gonna go, just because, I think we're really talking about two different goals, right? We're talking about one, the habitability and an occupation of the space by residents, right? And then two, it sounds like there's an educational component. And so I just so the first one I think is being met with, that I'm very excited for. But I think I'm just worried about these plaques, and if I recall from visiting the actual World War Trade Center Memorial in New York, it's taller than 9 inches. So I believe it's about like thigh or waist high. So not my only concern is that, people either passing by bike, in car, or walking, may see the statue, but may not know about these plaques. So I'm wondering if there's some kind of like vertical element that can kind of identify that the plaques exist, right? And then two, if these are just suggestions, so whatever is feasible, but I think it would better the design, because two, if there was some kind of like visual element on the actual plaque, right? We're talking about a plaque of a wall of text, and we know that from other plaques around town, that are actually like at face height, like people don't even read those, right? And so I'm just wondering if there's like either images of the leaders that are being mentioned, or some kind of vertical element that can be fashioned in a way that's integrated into the architectural language. I think would make this a much more successful project. But as it stands, it's fairly good.
Joseph, I'm going to answer for Brandon on one thing. The 9 inches is just the maximum height of that angled coping that goes around. It's more the seat wall height, so it's actually up between it's like right around 32 inches. So it's going to be up closer to waist height for a lot of people. Not for me, but for a lot of people. It's more a higher seat wall type height than what you would think of as like a low curve. So it's not on the ground. Is that what you were thinking?
There's a section, if you go back to sheet,
Go to 6 or 5, one of the two. Yeah, right there.
yeah, 6.5, that's right. And look at the wall type A. Go, which is that direction.
Yeah, I see that, and thanks for pointing that out. That was just, just a minor concern. I think my other two kind of
The wall type C is not,
artistic concerns are what I would kind of put the weight of my comments on.
I think I agree. That was one reason why we had the text. We reviewed the text itself. There's a lot of text out there now that's difficult to read because there's not a lot of contrast between the text and the material. So this is a much more visible version of some of this text. And then also the highlight, or what draws people in, is what the park is dedicated to, which is AP Turow. And then once they're there and they're in the plaza, that's when they are drawn to that secondary, which is these additional information plaques as you walk around the new base. It's really kind of replicating what's there now, which are broken and obviously need to be repaired, but there are panels on all 4 sides of the truncated pyramid that's the base now, where you can't even really see those until you walk up to it. And that was, as the secondary kind of approach to it. So as they go through the space, I think that's where they're going to be more involved with the additional text.
also, I just want to point out, it's showing wall type C, but that's at the front. That's not where we have text right there. It's wall type A, which is to the left that you can see. See, you can see the height there in terms of the height, in terms of walls, probably, I think Danny said something like 30 something inches high.
I do like your idea though about, I mean, the plaques probably aren't finalized. I think the plaques, if we could include some photos on the plaques, we've done that with historic markers in other locations and it works out really well. So it may be, you know, the plaques themselves can be changed very easily to accommodate that.
Okay, is it safe to assume there's no further comments? This concludes the presentation of dockets. The committee will now recess for 5 minutes. Consideration of dockets, including the public comment portion of the meeting, will begin at 12:25 p.m. Public comments will be accepted until the close of the 5-minute recess. The digital public comment form is now closed. We will begin with the consideration of dockets, including the public comment portion of the meeting. Joseph, did we receive any public comments?
No, I just checked, none.
Okay, thank you. So we will begin with item number 2, which was design review reconsideration. Actually, that one's withdrawn. So we'll begin with item number 3, which is zoning docket 5221 for the property at 1152 Magazine Street. As a reminder, this one project can be voted on separately. 1150 would be the proposed addition, and 1152 would be the renovation, the facade modifications to the existing warehouse facility. 1152, the renovations to the existing warehouse facility, is a zoning docket that is considered at this month's CPC meeting. So it would be preferable if we could come to a recommendation for that. And although it's preferable, it's not absolutely necessary. So we can consider them separately. So would the committee now make a motion on 1150, the addition?
Yes, I'll make a motion to defer on 1150 to allow the applicant time to resolve the access and site conditions as noted during the discussion.
Danny, can I add a friendly amendment to include building design into that?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion by Parks and Parkways to defer part 1 of design review of zoning docket 5221 to allow the applicant time to make design changes and further explore the access and site conditions that were mentioned, and also the building design recommendations. Do we have a second?
CPC Joseph will second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the motion passes. We'll now move to the second part of zoning docket, well, item number 3. And this would be as it relates to zoning docket 5221. Is the committee ready to make a motion?
I'll make a motion. I didn't remember Eleanor having any issues with the front. I'll make a motion to approve subject to sidewalk design being approved by DPW and Parkways.
I'll second.
And we have a second by DPW. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the motion passes. We'll now move on to item number 4, zoning docket 6321 for the property at 600 North Broad Street.
Haley, is this on a timeline where a deferral is not possible?
This is going to the City Planning Commission, and it would be considered prior to our next DAC meeting. That's correct. As we're starting to encourage, if the committee could make a motion that clearly stipulates any provisos that could be incorporated into the ordinance, that would be preferable.
I'll make a motion with knowing that others may have additions to approve subject to the applicant meeting the following conditions of a code compliant parking lot, street trees per 2311, landscape plan for review by Parks and Parkways, examination and determination of the driveway / parking space location for the food trucks, and the pedestrian and cyclist connections that are part of the Greenway corridor requirements to be further examined and also incorporated into the overall site design so that pedestrians and cyclists have priority.
As it relates to your last proviso, Danny, may I make a friendly amendment to just kind of envelope that in addition to the necessary site design, to put that into a traffic diagram that prioritizes pedestrian and cyclist access. And then I would add a separate proviso that ensures that vehicular parking is not the dominant visual element of the site.
So accepted.
Thank you.
Do we have a second? Okay, so the motion is not seconded, and so do we have an alternative motion?
I'll second.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thanks, Miguel.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you.
It was finally fixed after all this
Just in
time.
time, right? Okay. So we have a motion for approval subject to those provisos stated by Parks and Parkways. We have a second by Capital Projects. I'll do a roll call vote. Haley, yay. Joseph?
Begrudgingly, yay.
Danny?
Yay.
Eleanor, absent. Miguel?
Yay.
Lewis?
Yay.
Okay, and Lindsay Gladys is absent. So, all right, so that motion passes. We'll move on to item number 5. This was design review docket 7521, the DAC only review for the project at the Audubon Zoo.
Make a motion to approve.
We have a motion by Parks and Parkways. Do we have a second?
DPC, second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed, and the motion passes. Item number 6, design review 7621. This is for the Treme Center. Do we have a motion?
What's the, let me ask you this, is this going for anywhere else? Does this have to go for anybody else?
No, this is a DAC only review, and it's because it's a public project.
Right. I make a motion to defer to allow the applicant time to either show why they can't accommodate this elsewhere in the building, or to provide us with the elevations and renderings that will show us the actual impact of this facility in closing off the front door of the building.
I was going to recommend the same, Danny, all of that. They need to provide renderings, and also CPA staff should come in and tell us why it can't be located elsewhere. So just the slight amendment to what you said, to include all of what you're requesting. It should be deferred.
I would encourage, yes, as part of my motion, I would encourage the applicant to examine placing the hydraulic lift internally to avoid all of this issue.
Actually, so Danny, I recommend we defer to resubmit indicating why it needs to be at that location. They could perhaps indicate an alternate location if possible, but also they need to indicate how the elevator is going to impact the elevation of the building physically. So
Right.
they have to come up with appropriate renderings to show what this is going to look like on the main elevation of the building, the principal elevation of the building.
I agree.
And I would add the slightest of amendments to include full floor plans of both floors, so we have a better conceptual understanding of its impact in other entrances and egresses, etc.
That's also acceptable.
I agree.
Okay. We have a motion by Parks and Parkways to defer to allow the applicant time to submit more detailed construction drawings that would show the impact of the elevator to the main facade, and also to provide alternative, a site diagram showing why it would not be able to be located in a different location, and also to touch upon the fact why it would not be able to be located within the interior of the structure. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
And we have a second by Capital Projects. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All opposed? And the motion passes. The next item is number 7, design review, docket 7721 for the shade structure at St. Andrew's Episcopal School.
Make a motion to approve with the recommendation to the applicant of examining the color choices to provide a cooler experience.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second by Capital Projects. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? And the motion passes. Again, item number 8 was withdrawn. And the final item is item number 9 for the AP Torres Civil Rights Memorial Park. Do we have a motion?
Yeah, CPC will make a motion to approve. Parkways, do you want final approval, subject to your review and approval too?
Yeah, it actually requires our review and approval. It's one of our facilities, so
Perfect.
we've actually approved it already, but because the cost went over $100,000, that's why it's coming here.
Gotcha. So subject to Parks and Parkways approval and with the suggestion to ameliorate the plaques.
Okay, do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a second
Capital.
by Capital Projects. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All opposed? And the motion passes. Okay, this concludes the July DAC meeting. Thank you, everyone, and see you all next month.
Thank you.
Aye.
Bye.